Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, what do you do with a guy who was a rock and roll disc jockey overnight, did some comedy radio, and then got into IT? Big time IT. Well, he's got some great ideas. His name is Chuck Helstein because after the IT job, he bought a radio station. Pretty cool station, too. Chuck Helstein is with us, and he's going to give us some ideas on how to make better radio with good IT. It's coming up next on TWiRT. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store with outstanding service, savings, and support. Online at bgs.cc. By Broadcast Bionics with the Bionic Studio, including talk show control, social media, and visual radio. Broadcast Bionics brings exceptional audience engagement to radio and TV. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. By Nautel, worry-free transmission you can count on with outstanding control, reliability, efficiencies, and Nautel's unmatched 24/7 customer support. Online at nautel.com. And by Max Connect Wireless, prioritized high-speed internet service designed for transmitter sites and remote broadcasts. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to that light bulb from the top of the tower, the one I stole right behind me there. I'm Kirk Harnack. So glad that you've joined us today. There's a lot of ways that you can spend your time, and we try to make this hour fun for you, and maybe we learn a few things together. I know that's going to happen today. I really do. I'm in the Telos Alliance studio in Nashville, Tennessee, where it is a beautiful summer day. I left the window to my office open a little while ago, and I came down from upstairs, and I'm walking around the office getting ready for the show. I'm thinking, what is that noise? It sounded like a rushing river outside my door, and I'm a little ways from any rushing rivers. And I'm what is it? Oh, it's the cicadas. That's what it was. So shut the window so we can all keep our sanity. How are the cicadas in your area? Boy, they are something around here. And really, they haven't bothered me that much so far this year. We haven't driven over, tons of cicada bodies. So anyway, just wondering how that's doing for you. It's the every 200 and some year thing where two broods come out at once. Hey, Chris Tarr may be with us. He's not with us right now, but he may be. We've got a guest for you that came along as kind of a surprise. Our guest today was suggested by a former guest on this show, and I'm so glad that he did because we're going to learn some things today about IT as it applies specifically to radio, and I'm going to enjoy learning these things, and I really think you will too, because we've got an expert. Let's go ahead and introduce him. Chuck Helstein is with us. Chuck, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, brother. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad you're here. And where is here for you?
Here for me right now is in Sedona, Arizona. I'm up in the Red Rocks filming the show, looking out the window right now. It's gorgeous, man. It's like 90 degrees, not a cloud in the sky.
So for some year, you were a disc jockey and kind of a good one at a rock station. Give me just a little thumbnail sketch about what that was about, that rock station experience.
A good one would be debatable. I was there. They put me overnights. I did a pretty decent stint, a few years at a classic rock station down here in Phoenix. That was kind of how I cut my teeth. I also was a promotions director there, did some sales work. Literally, I've touched pretty much every aspect of radio I could over my career at some point or another.
But then you left radio for some higher ground, and that higher ground, it's a name that we're all familiar with, and we all think of this famous cutesy tootsie race driver. Tell me about the IT job you had.
Yeah, I've worked at a couple big companies, some hosting providers. I worked for GoDaddy, which is the one you're referencing, right? Everyone asks about Danica Patrick. She's a sweetheart to meet in person. She's great. I spent about 10 years there. I did a stint for a relatively large fintech company that you guys all use kind of in your daily lives from a security perspective. Worked for a startup in New York City called DigitalOcean. We still use them here at KAZM for a lot of our infrastructure. So to your point, higher ground. It was more like financially lucrative ground. And yeah, I headed for the hills. Radio's a thing, man. We've got the sickness, so we're back to it.
All right, so you left the higher ground of the IT industry, came back down to earth to to radio. And I understand that you had a little cash in your pocket and you thought, I'm going to own a radio station. So tell what did you acquire?
Yeah. So, radio has always been a passion of mine. Obviously, if you go to school for it, you make it on the air, you've done more than 99% of the population. There's something about radio and its spirit that kind of calls to me, right? To be this hub for a community, or to be the thread that can bind a community together. Those thoughts have always really resonated with me. It's like kind of transitioned away from tech thought into a different chapter of my life. I really wanted to focus on something where there's some giving back to a community, and really being a part of the community, and trying to uplift others. This station in this area seemed like the prime space for me to do that in.
So your station's obviously call letters right behind you, KAZM.
Yep.
We're going to get into the story of KAZM and some of the things that you've done there. And they've all been, well, a lot of them have been IT related to make it run better. So we're meeting with, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said almost all the things I've done are IT related, but yes, I digress. Sorry.
Yeah. So we're going to continue our conversation with Chuck Helstein here in just a moment. Our show is brought to you in part by Nautel, makers of incredibly fine transmitters. And I want to tell you about this thing that Nautel has going on that you need to know about as well. It's their HD digital radio test drive. Yeah, a test drive. It's not free, but part of it's free. Part of it is, you get to save some money here for a while. The HD digital radio test drive is an offering intended to break down the barrier, keeping a lot of broadcasters from trying HD radio. HD radio transmission has the potential to create a real presence on the car dashboard, and help stations by staying competitive in a field of alternative media choices, which do appear on the dashboard. It's based on Nautel's software-based air chain technology. HD Digital Radio Test Drive allows broadcasters to try HD radio transmission in their market for up to 6 months to unlock listeners and content and new revenue potential without needing to install and purchase about $40,000 or $50,000 of HD gear. Now, there's still some things to put in. An easy, minimal cost option to turn on HD radio, so broadcasters can test new revenue generating opportunities with your sales team. You can experiment with new formats, even new languages if that's appropriate in your market, or even short-term pop-up event stations, like for, I don't know, your Sweet 16s or some kind of summer sports or fall sports or even a Christmas type station. You can see the impact on listener retention and engagement with album art or graphics displayed on the auto dashboard. And you can counter maybe some competing alternate media. You can get real-world market data with up to that 6 months trial time. And here's what you need to get started. Here's your shopping list. You need to lease or purchase a Nautel GV2 or upgrade your GV transmitter to a GV2. You need an Xperi main station or equivalent license and a signed trial agreement with Nautel. And you need to have some content. You can start producing content for 1 to 4 channels. You're probably already doing 1 now anyway. Maybe you're doing more. And deliver that via Livewire or AES67 into the transmitter. Yeah, you need to get the details on this. It's more than I can describe in 60 seconds. So check it out by contacting Nautel. Maybe you know your Nautel rep. I happen to know that Jeff is down in Louisiana today at Louisiana Broadcasters. I guarantee. But contact Nautel at nautel.com, Nautel, nautel.com, and check out this HD radio test drive. Thanks, Nautel, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, I'm Kirk Harnack along with Chuck Helstein here. Chuck, man, we got a lot of ground to cover here. One thing I want to point out is that for those of you listening right now, you may notice there's an occasional dropout in Chuck's audio, and maybe his video freezes for a second. And this is not because Chuck's a bad IT guy. he's living in a desert, literally, of IT connectivity. What's your challenge there with connectivity, Chuck?
There's a plethora of difficulties, right? First off, we're limited by providers. You have 2 to choose from. And their infrastructure is relatively small. So I myself, even for this station, just to get our satellite feeds and stay connected ourselves, had to devise kind of an IT solution where we pipe all our signals together, and it's called bonding your signals. So we have like a CenturyLink signal bonded to an Optimum internet signal, bonded to yet another like 3G signal. So we soak up as much bandwidth as humanly possible that we can get here at the station. But as you guys can see, still not sufficient. So we're pushing for more.
And this is a a problem that and some people think it's not a problem. And look, you can be on either side of the argument or in the middle of the argument, but you've got people who maybe don't want infrastructure built out. Like I asked you before the show started, well, what's the problem with running fiber into Sedona? And you said, well, there's people for whom it tears up the environment to bury miles and miles of fiber cable, and you don't want it above ground. At least a lot of people don't, because that kind of looks ugly. Another telephone wire going across. So just from respectfully from an environmental point of view, what are some of the challenges that people throw up to growing infrastructure?
Yeah, it's a great question, really. The people of Sedona and Arizona, generally speaking, are some of the more conscious people as far as the environment and their impact to it. As such, Sedona is a very beautiful place. One of the most beautiful places I've seen with the stunning red rocks, right? It's of utmost importance to the city and the state that majestic beauty is maintained. And I understand that. And then there's a lot of just kind of information that's out there that people don't understand. We were joking a little bit about 5G. That's kind of been a weird taboo topic. But because of that lack of understanding, it's a real barrier now. Like, we don't have 5G here, and I don't know that we're going to get it anytime soon. So it's an interesting kind of cross section of progress, maybe some misinformation. There's a lot of factors at play.
I would guess that most of the listeners of this podcast pretty well understand or are of the belief, as I am, that RF is RF. And it doesn't matter if it's modulated in some of the 5G methodologies that are out there, or if it's modulated with a UHF TV signal, which a lot of the 5G space that's used now for 5G used to be modulated with UHF TV channels. And they
Right.
compacted all those back down together in the lower part of the band. And so we know that RF is RF, and we don't know and this, I'm not going to get a whole topic, it's a whole nother podcast or a 60 Minutes episode, that RF is RF, and, too much of it might have a heating effect or does have a heating effect. Whether it's bad for the human body, I don't know. Does it transmit mind viruses? I don't know how to do that, and I'm pretty good with RF. So, and then they liken it to things like HARP or, jets putting contrails and mistakenly calling contrails chemtrails. So it's a whole topic, but I do kind of get it. I mean, there's some places that are beautiful. We don't want them spoiled, and then there's a lot of misinformation about what may constitute spoilage. By the way, we have a kind of a similar problem. I own some stations in American Samoa, and for years we didn't have undersea cable to Samoa.
Oh, wow.
because the people who made that decision for the government owned the teleport. So, there wasn't going to be any undersea cable.
Of interest there.
No conflict, not at all. So apparently New Zealand gave up on some old cable that was like 25 years old. And they said, hey, Samoa, you want to buy it? And Samoa bought it. They chopped it off. Please. They dragged it up, and it was really slow. Anyway, now they've run real undersea cable. But every time my internet goes out in American Samoa, my business partner, Larry, always says the same thing. Well, I guess a whale pooped on the cable.
That's awesome.
I don't know. That's Anyway, back to you. Okay, I want to get into the IT stuff. We had a kind of a bit of a laundry list here. Where did I put it? There it is. You got that? When you bought these stations? What were some of the glaring things you said, okay, we got to fix this. We got to fix this. We got to make this better. How did you start your laundry list of what to improve?
Yeah, I mean, I came in wide-eyed, bushy-tailed, and was like, I'm going to own a radio station. And then I started looking under the consoles, and probably literally within like 30 seconds, I looked to my friend and I said, it's all got to go. Like, we have to level it and start from scratch. For a couple of reasons. One, how do we see things? We're not necessarily young anymore. myself and the folks we work with, we're cut our teeth on reels to reels, but that's about as far back as we go. I got a Collins transmitter sitting back there from 1960. So it's a stretch for me to be able to kind of understand all of this and really get, deep in the weeds. So I said, you know what, we've got to modernize. It's all got to go. And literally I picked a room. It was production room 2. And I said, this is the room we're going to cut in at. We yanked everything out, cable by cable, inch by inch. Everything that was laid here in 74 came out, and we started anew. And kind of that was how we began our journey in being current in 2024.
We're going to get to the studio and audio gear because you've got some interesting stories to tell about that. But I hadn't even thought to ask you about transmitters. Did you replace the Collins transmitter? And if so, what are you using now for transmitters?
So I did not replace it. The Collins now serves as a backup to a Nautel.
Okay.
The Collins, though, like if you've ever leveraged one of these or tried on, but for me at my age and in my experience, when it started arcing, I literally hit the floor and fell backwards and went like, oh my God, I'm going to die now. So I did not expect that. But no, it runs, and it's our backup transmitter in case anything happens with the Nautel. I'm debating whether to keep it or not, but we'll see. It works. It's functional. So
now, are you speaking of the AM or the FM or both here?
Yeah, so my AMs are the Collins and the Nautel. I use an American Amplifiers Technologies amplifier or transmitter rather for my FM.
Gotcha. Okay, good deal. All right, well, let's move to the studio gear. We're going to have to go cover this topic of you've got a facility that doesn't seem to contain much Microsoft branded code in it, and I want to hear about that stories. I'm purposely being vague here to let you pick right up and run with that story because that's amazing. Most radio stations have a whole lot of stuff from Redmond, Washington in there.
Yes, sir. Again, when we looked at that station when we first got here and we said, okay, everything's got to go. And I said, let's lean on this tech experience. What have I seen? Over the years, I've seen Windows machines that were vulnerable, hacked, exploited literally countless of times. And I recognize as radio continues to move toward a technology future, we're going to need to contend with security and infrastructures that we maybe haven't thought of before. So I made the bold, some may say silly decision to stick to a Mac infrastructure end to end. To your point, I do not have a Windows system on my network with the singular exception of the Orban XPN AM. A worthy exception, I would argue. But so yeah, Mac shop end to end with that one exception. And it works flawless. We have literally zero security concerns. Our stability is pretty phenomenal. I couldn't be happier with the results, to be honest with you.
So, okay. So a lot of us are scratching our heads. I guess you probably have an automation system of some kind. How are you doing that without Windows?
Yeah. So there is a program I learned back when I was at ASU. My station manager at the time, his name was Jonathan Hutchinson. And he's like, I found this amazing piece of software. It's called MegaSeg, and we're going to leverage it for the station. I said, okay. And so I used it. I loved it. It was super intuitive, very Mac centric as far as how it looks, how it feels, how it acts. And I was hooked. I've used other like SAM broadcasters and all the other suites and services, obviously, in my time. MegaSeg seems to be the most logical, straightforward approach that I've seen. So it's kind of our hidden weapon, if you will.
What about for like multi-track production? On my Mac, I use Audacity when I need to do that. Of course, there's Mac versions of things like Adobe Audition. What are you doing there for production?
Yeah, production work, we still leverage Adobe Audition. There are some other like Mac-centric tools we could leverage, but Adobe's done a great job with their services and systems and in moving it to the cloud. So we absolutely still leverage them from a production perspective as well. They work great with Macs. And,
Gotcha.
It's a lot of cases we can help people a little bit and coach them up if they want to do some of their own shows or some of their own podcasting. So yeah, that's still a part of our system as well.
How do you handle traffic and billing? I'm not really into that world of traffic and billing, but I figured most everything would be PC based.
Yeah, no, actually, I do it right from the Mac. So MegaSeg itself has a super robust logging system. I just export my logs, I attach them to my invoices once a month, and away we go. Um, it's just a matter of exporting an Excel sheet and kind of slicing and dicing the data however you see fit, right? So yeah,
Okay.
it's actually
Okay.
not bad at all. I find it, like I said, a lot more stripped down. I think you're going to see through this conversation, there's maybe 3 or 4 pieces of software we leverage in total, and that's what kind of encompasses everything we need to do.
Do you do your own music scheduling to play back music, or do you use some other service? How does that work for you?
Nope. So we do that right through MegaSeg as well. We have like formulas that I kind of pre-select on the back end. So it's similar to any other radio station, right? You've got your kind of heavy rotation, your low rotation, your medium rotations, and you schedule them out kind of percentage based, how much you want them to play. And then you kind of pop in, take your breaks as you want.
I'm trying to fit this in my head here. I didn't even ask you before. What formats are you playing? Are the AM and the FM the same programming?
They are. So we're primarily an AM station. We use an FM translator. So I'm in that kind of
Ah,
area. My
hmm
FM's like a stepchild, if you will. But
yeah.
yeah, so we're playing primarily we would call easy listening, or actually known probably now as Yacht Rock. So you got to
Oh
think
yeah,
of like
sure, yeah.
your doers. That's our core format. But we aim to really full service local radio. So we spend a fair bit of time local affairs show, local politics shows, as well as like
Yeah.
national state coverage. So we air all of the Arizona sports, your Phoenix Sun. We carry all those as well. So your traditional kind of local full service radio.
I'm curious about the uptake of people in Sedona listening to your FM translator. It's a lower power. I'm guessing Sedona's not really all spread out, even though your AM signal 780 is a great frequency. It can go a long ways as long as the conductivity is all right. How is the FM listening compared to the AM listening?
Well, I run an Orban trio on my FM. And so when you get an XPN AM and an Orban trio going, they don't sound that far off from each other. Like the AM sounds better than I could have expected, honestly. The thing in the trick with the FM here was to not just get coverage from like a width perspective, it's the depth of coverage here, right? That's why I run such like a hot transmitter, because I have to go all the way down in those peaks and valleys. It's super difficult, but we've tuned it in a way and such. The FM is basically Sedona's station. The larger
Mm.
AM is kind of you know 70% of the states, right? That's kind of our AM coverage. So
Hmm.
that's how I frame it. The FM is Sedona's little gem when people are here, kind of visiting and doing their things. Tune in, see what's going on. And kind of as you drive away and visit the rest of Arizona, don't forget to check us out on your AM side.
Gotcha. Okay, I see how you push that. That makes total sense. I got to tell you, Yacht Rock is one of my absolute favorite formats. I could listen to that most of the day, most every day. And I was talking to a programming consultant actually just a week ago, and I asked him about Yacht Rock, and he was kind of okay on. He says, "Well, really, you're talking about," and I forget how he had a regular radio format name for it. It wasn't light AC, but he had a name for it, like an 80s heavy anyway. And yet I think that Yacht Rock is its own niche, not smaller than a lot of other radio than whatever category he was trying to put it in. And that's just my opinion. But and to me, there are sometimes like a Yacht Rock version of a song, like one of the absolute I can't think of the right word. One of the songs that just typifies yacht rock would be Starbucks "Moonlight Feels Right," which may be my favorite song on the planet. And there's a yacht rock version of it. It's just an
Right.
extended version with lots of repeats of the drum line and the not the xylophone. What's that thing called? The marimba. And
Yes.
so I like that kind of stuff. I also would like. There's a lot of Brazilian versions of Rolling Stones songs and things like that
Sure.
have females singing the Mick Jagger part. And to me, these are yacht rock too. I don't know if everybody else considers them that way, but they sound good when you're driving around Miami Bay, in a boat, because I've gotten to do
Yeah.
that. Anyway,
It was a
to tell
real
me about your version of yacht rock. What's your
yeah.
envisionment for that?
I was going to say it's a difficult thread to fit in the needle there, as it were. When we first went on the air, December 1st, we were like Yacht Rock and Yacht Rock only. After about a month, we recognized our playlist was a little bit lean, and we needed to fill it out more. And that's kind of the honest, short answer of it. So we went back and thought, okay, what really is Yacht Rock? The idea is it's intended to be kind of mellow, not in your face, not aggressive, and it can kind of transcend generations. I know when I'm hitting the mark when it's something my dad would have liked, and my son will also enjoy it, and I can enjoy it. So I try to program for those moments and those songs. So when I say the Eagles, like Hotel California, who's really going to argue these things, right? Stevie Nicks is of the world. That's kind of where my head was at. And so we kind of slowly filled it in. Again, I'm going to use that word depth of our playlist and added a lot of maybe some Southern rock, right? We added some of those, like some CCR. Those are kind of some feel-good family songs. And before we knew it, with that approach, we ended up with a pretty robust playlist of I think really good songs that, you go hiking around Sedona and it feels good to listen to.
Very cool. Very cool. I like that. I'm going to have to tune into your station. Hey, it's This Week in Radio Tech. We're talking to Chuck Helstein. I'm Kirk Harnack here on This Week in Radio Tech. It's our 698th episode. Phew, we're just a couple of weeks away from episode 700. I'm not sure what we're going to do. We'll break out the tequila or we'll do something fun. Hey, Chuck, coming up after this break, we're going to talk a little bit about cost and scalability. You had mentioned this in our prep session, how these factor into radio's success. I want to hear your thoughts about that. And we're also going to talk about coming up radio DNS and why Chuck thinks that's really important. And I want to know more about that and also about how to make your stations consumable. That's all coming up on This Week in Radio Tech. Our show is brought to you in part by Broadcast Bionics and the fabulous Bionic Studio. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the Bionic Studio. The Bionic Studio brings all audience interaction to the fingertips of a production team in radio, TV, and podcast. Our workflow-led system is working 24/7 around the world for small broadcasters and national and international networks. Our telephony module, Bionic Talk Show, allows cost-effective centralization, remote operation, scalability, and resilience across an entire network of stations, but at the same time is used in single-studio self-op environments. Social media curation and activity is now considered a broadcast-critical part of programming. Bionic Social means the studio isn't overwhelmed with a wall of interaction from an ever-growing number of social platforms. We combine SMS, MMS, and email together with a speech-to-text service for listeners using smart speakers. We enable studio teams to curate, filter, and display all platforms in one place, and post text, images, and video content to multiple platforms in one operation. Effortless collection of video content with Bionic Director has helped position some of the world's most successful stations as leaders in viral content, generating appointments to listen and free marketing via retweets and shares. Bionic Contest enables end-to-end tracking of on-air competitions, live reads, and prizes. These can be on-air contests, automated SMS entry, or online. Anywhere, and Skype TX for Radio brings high-quality audio and video contribution into the studio with ease. No need for dedicated PCs to run different applications. Everything is controlled within the Bionic Studio UI, and incoming connections are visible to users along with all other platforms. Our codec integration enables connection, algorithm configuration, and directory to a wide range of IP and ISDN codecs. The Bionic Studio, a unique suite of products designed to enable your talent to work smarter.
Check it out from Broadcast Bionics, the Bionic Studio at bionic.co.uk. Love these folks. They also make the virtual rack. And, I think that's so cool. In fact, I'm guessing that Chuck and I will end up talking about virtualization of some broadcast functions. So, but right now, Chuck had some thoughts during our pre-show meeting about cost and scalability and how these factor into radio's success. And Chuck, I'm not exactly sure what you were talking about, so help me understand your thoughts on cost and scalability.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So My tech background, a lot of it was kind of around budgeting and how we're going to, shoehorn enormous projects, both from a cost and time perspective, trying to keep those as minimal as possible. So we really took that kind of at this station, we took it over. It's not necessarily gut this thing and strip everything it needs out of it. It's how can we leverage, new technologies and have an open mind and see what can actually work. One of the prime examples I give is phone service, right? The prior regime that owned the station was paying, $12,000-$13,000 a year for phone service. I won't exactly share the methodology behind it, but I pay significantly less than that. Basically $12,000 less than that. So it's, being willing to try to find alternative solutions to kind of what have been historically just the way things have been done. If you take that approach, I think you can find that, technologies, solutions, and systems are exponentially more affordable than people will think. We mentioned MegaSeg a few times, and I'm not, necessarily toting anything for them, but it's something I talk about a lot because I purchased one license, and that license stays with me forever. So we bought the software, and I don't have to worry about licensing fees, monthly fees, yearly subscription fees, nothing. I buy one code per system I put it on. It's not overly expensive. You're talking a few $100s, and you're good to go. I just don't think people have, maybe had the experience to go down and kind of evaluate these products, services, and software, what they can do. I was lucky enough I had to do that as a job. So it kind of taught me some of those skills, found myself in a really good place all of a sudden to evaluate these things. So again, just critically look through and take stock of your systems and figure out what's really critical and not, and what are some unique ways to solve these challenges.
And yeah, you didn't want to mention the name of the free or near free phone solution. That there are, you can get some SIP services for free or nearly free. I know that at my stations we pay a whole lot less than we used to, but we're still paying something.
Sure.
But if we go on from there, there are, I guess a lot of us, I don't know. Sometimes we've been burned by free services, or we of course find out, maybe to our chagrin, maybe we don't care, that if it's free, well, we are the product being sold. And so some people, like Gmail, well, that's free, except you're the product being sold. I use Gmail all the time. I use the whole slew of Google services. The company I work for full time, TELUS Alliance, pays for Google Desktop, Workspace, that kind of stuff. And we find it to be very, very helpful, very productive. So maybe you can give us some examples of other services that are free or near free, whether it's certificate services, if you need an SSL or some kind of security certificate, or some other things that people should look at. Hey, this is free, you can get it, or it's darn near free. You ought to be interested in it to solve this problem or that problem for your station. Do you have some other examples?
Yeah. So Google Voice was the one I was referencing. Like no secret there. There's not a lot of other free services I leverage in Google Voice. I do pay a pittance for, as it were. But there's a lot of services, like I said, that are no longer requiring subscriptions monthly that will cost you forever. For example, I would talk about like my streaming infrastructure. Again, full disclosure, I work for DigitalOcean. So, but their service is super affordable. You're talking a droplet for what, $5-10 a month, and you're streaming a radio station. Those are super scalable. I think you and I talked in our pre-show meeting about servers being dynamic, have them scale up and scale down based on traffic demands, automatically in the background. That is a little more technical. But if you can overcome those hurdles, you find yourself with you not paying for any server space that you're not actively using. And so the costs stay relatively low. My whole streaming infrastructure probably cost me something maybe like $20-30 a month. I'm running 4 different streams, and they're resilient in and of themselves, right? There's our main one, and there's a cover for that main one, and there's a secondary and a cover for the secondary. It was really easy. The software that I put on those servers was in fact free. It's open source. So anyone can use them. There was no subscription model there. So it's there. You just kind of have to know where to look to find it, and really leverage those examples when you do find it, right? Like take it to the house and make the best use of it you can, and get some savings from it.
I guess I tend to find that when I'm implementing solutions, looking for solutions, a lot of us are of the mindset that, well, if we pay for it, then we're probably going to get some support, and maybe it's worth paying for. But it is nice to find things that cost next to nothing or a very pittance amount. I'm familiar with the droplets that you mentioned, a little bit of server space at DigitalOcean.
Yep.
I had one for a while just to play with, a little playground, a little sandbox to play with. I'm not sure what I learned, but I learned that it was cool. I just wasn't quite smart enough to do a whole lot with it. You know what? It was an article that I read. A guy had a package that you could install that would give you, I think, Rivendell automation. Linux-based automation, sure. And you hit a couple links and it would install for you at DigitalOcean. And so I was playing with that for a while. But I'm sorry. Let me get back to my question. I hate to spend time going down a rabbit hole that doesn't lead anywhere. How can I maybe discern the wheat from the chaff in terms of things that are worthwhile exploring and putting some effort into, that are free or close to free, versus other things that that's just not going anywhere. You don't need to do that. Do you have some discernment that I could come up with, or
I can try.
Yeah,
I could give you some prescriptive advice potentially, right? So
yeah, that's the word. That's the word.
Yep. You have to kind of take this though in the right context. So I have to again harp that I'm a Mac only infrastructure. So when I needed to figure out like how to do virtualization or send audio places, my automation system can't do that. It turns out there's only, one or two programs that are actually done on Mac that can do that. So in a way, the choice is kind of slim and made for you. It's not very expensive. I think it's $29. It's a program called Audio Hijack. And that's how we ship audio all around the studio between all different rooms. That's basically, the PC version of Dante, except it's on Mac. A virtual board. That's effectively what that is. It's just on Mac, and it costs us $29, right? And so, maybe free is the wrong word, but again, these are massively lower rates than your typical commercial stations are paying for any of these softwares or abilities.
Audio Hijack for Mac. Okay, all right.
Yep, Audio Hijack is the company's called Rogue Amoeba. They have a whole suite of services, right? So we Audio. We use another program called Loopback Audio. And
I've got that. I use that.
Yeah. Loopback is like your highest level. Audio Hijack is like and the MegaSeg is your automation that kind of flows underneath it all, right? And that is that we would call affectionately our stack. In the server world, you have like a lamp stack, right? And you set it up.
Right.
It's got Elasticsearch and all these goofy things. That's my radio.
Gosh, let's see. Oh, I did want to jump back into something from your prior experience. That was, you worked with a radio service that did a lot of comedy. I've always thought comedy on the radio was a great idea, but I'm not sure everybody else does. I love to listen to comedy. Tell me about your experience with comedy radio.
Yeah, so the gentleman I work with now, his name is Ryan. He's my production director. Him and I did a stint at All Comedy Radio, an AM station down in Phoenix. Gosh, I don't want to date myself too much, but probably 20 years or so ago. It was great, man. It was a really fun genre. It almost kind of reminds me of what radio maybe was in the 80s or the 70s. Jocks just literally having fun, kind of spitballing back and forth. It was a great experience. It was one of the more fun, goofy radio experiences we've had, where you could really just kind of let it go as a personality and kind of say what you want to say and experiment a lot. It was nice. It wasn't your typical air checks after the fact, right? Where the program director sits you down and has a little whip the dog session. It was more like, hey, you could have been more creative there. You could have pushed the envelope there, And I'm like, what? Really? Oh, all right, I'll give it a shot.
Now you're opening my eyes. See, I thought All Comedy Radio would just be you playing back old Bill Cosby records, or maybe Rodney Dangerfield. But it sounds like you the on-air talent live was also doing some comedy.
Yeah, we had a whole live shows that we would bring in from like local comedy shows in Phoenix. So Phoenix, is a big enough market. It can support some kind of out there ideas, right? And so there's enough comics and there's enough comedy infrastructure that a station can support that. Unfortunately, that station went by the wayside some years ago. But Sirius XM, for example, does a really great job with all their comedy programming. I mean, it's just comedy after comedy after comedy. And I agree with you. I think it's a really good radio format in general.
I could probably listen to hours of Stephen Wright over and over again, but that's just me.
We would find ourselves, right? We'd have to leave and we'd hear an old show and we'd be like, oh, this Andrew Dice Clay thing is amazing. Like, we should stick around and listen to this real quick, Yeah.
On the comedy subject, not that anybody cares, but so much comedy is designed only to be told in the language in which it was written. Because it depends, so much of our comedy depends on double entendre, especially dad jokes. So, in other words, jokes often don't translate well to other languages. And so when my wife speaks Spanish, that's her primary language. And when I was dating her, we both enjoy comedy, but I was trying to find things that, would translate for her. Stephen Wright jokes translate usually very well because there's very little double entendre. Work, right? They're all thought jokes, right? So.
I have a similar. Yeah, my wife is also from a Spanish-speaking country, so I feel you on that. Sometimes my jokes don't quite hit as I expect.
So I want to talk a bit more about your background that feeds your current work in radio. You used a term earlier in the show that you said fintech, and then I think you also may have mentioned SecOps. Talk to me about what these two areas of expertise are. What is fintech?
Fintech is just a different sector of the internet. That would be financial technologies. So your PayPals, your Stripes, those companies of the world, right? They fall in the category. SecOps, a role that it occupies within a fintech company, right? What security ops effectively is kind of your front lines of your military in a way. They're monitoring the network and everything that kind of orbits around your business and trying to ensure that any attacks are dealt with or pushed back or refuted, as it were, and ensuring overall health of the business and the network from a security perspective. It's fairly all-encompassing and pretty intense.
Gotcha. So something that I'd like to talk about after we take our next break is this technology of containerized software. And even if you're not using any of it there, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about how that's going. My employer, Telos Alliance, and as well as a couple other companies, are offering various broadcast infrastructure products in the form of containerized software. And I'm using some of this myself at a radio station in Oxford, Mississippi. It's an alt rock station, and we're using an audio console that runs in a Docker container on a Linux machine. We also have a phone system that's running in another Docker container on the same machine, and it's working out really well. In fact, it's physically located at the transmitter site because for various reasons, our main studio has a studio in it, but we don't transmit from there 24/7. We remotely access the transmitter site where the automation system is and all that stuff. So I'd like to talk to you about that technology in just a few minutes. Our show This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack. Chuck Helstein is our guest. He's got pretty interesting background in IT and radio, so it's a pretty interesting conversation. We're brought to you in part by our friends at Henry Engineering. Now, Henry Engineering makes a box that, look, I know it seems like a simple box, but I love this box because it's an easy peasy way to solve a problem. And if you've heard the story before, hey, just listen again. I've got at a transmitter site, I've got essentially 2 racks of gear. This is the transmitter site I was just talking about, where we've got all of our automation systems, our transmitter, our Axia network, our audio processing, our streaming encoders, our stream processing. Everything is there at the transmitter site in 2 racks. And a lot of the gear has 2 power supplies. So we have some Dell servers, some refurbished Dell servers. We've got a newer file server for the automation system and a few other pieces of gear that have 2 power supplies. So, hey, no problem. I take one power plug from each piece of gear and plug it into a power strip that's run by a UPS. And the other one goes over to what I call shore power or commercial power. And so if the UPS dies, hey, I still got commercial power and vice versa. Well, I've got a whole bunch of other gear that I really want to stay on, but they only have 1 power supply. Now, most people will just plug that into the UPS. Well, guess what? The freaking UPS has died a couple times. We bought a UPS unbeknownst to us, spent plenty of money on it. It doesn't, if the batteries in it go all the way down, when the power comes back on, it doesn't come back on. How about that for sucking? That's terrible. Well, we're getting a different UPS in there, and actually, I've already taken that one out of the rack. But we can still have the power be off long enough to get rid of, for that to die down. Well, what I've put in place is a power strip that's run by one of these Henry Engineering back UPS boxes. It's just a convenient way to give you 2 input power sources and 1 output. And one of your inputs is going to be from your UPS. So if you need to take it down to change the batteries, you don't have to go unplug a bunch of stuff or move some things. It immediately switches right over to the shore power, to the commercial power. And when the UPS comes back on, it waits. It monitors, makes sure the UPS is going to be solid, and then it switches back over to the UPS. It's just a convenient way to handle that. And there's companies that make this type of device that are rack mounted that maybe cost a lot more. This is exactly what I need to run some EAS gear, to run my Omnia 11, and to run a few workstations that only have 1 power supply. This is the box that I use, the back UPS from Henry Engineering. It's got a few dials and switches you can set on it. It's got a remote connector on it, so you can remotely check and see, hey, what's it doing right now? You can check on that. And otherwise, just like everything else from Hank Landsberg, it's simple, it's easy, it's safe, and I love it. Check it out. Then the place to buy these things would be from your friends and mine at Broadcasters General Store. The website, bgs.cc, Broadcasters General Store. Hey, I just talked to them today. Good folks at BGS. They're really built their business around answering the phone. So if you're like me, you're busy, maybe you're driving somewhere to a transmitter site, back to the studio, pick up the phone and give them a call. They have made it so easy to just deal with them on the phone at 352-622-7700. 352-622-7700. They can take your order, of course. They can advise you on the most popular kind of gear that would do this or that, whatever you need. And they can also get you the best pricing and tell you about delivery, all in the same phone call. These guys are really on their game at Broadcasters General Store. Check them out. Thanks a lot, BGS and Henry Engineering, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, it's Kirk Harnack, and I am here along with Chuck Helstein. We're talking about IT in radio broadcasting. We covered the fintech and the SecOps thing. I guess if you go into a typical radio station, like maybe one of my stations, and sure. I don't know if I'm doing some security right. I'm sure there's better things I could do. I'm sure there's things I don't know how to do. Are there a top 2 or 3 things that a novice or a moderate IT person or a broadcast engineer really ought to at least look? If you're going to, even if you don't pay attention to the deep stuff, pay attention to these 3 things, and you're going to eliminate 80% of your threat vector for getting attacked by one thing or another. What would your advice be for somebody like me?
As you can see, I'm just rolling my eyes and him and hawing because there's a million different directions I can go with this. And it's almost impossible for me to come up with a good answer here. But I'll try to just stick with radio. For one, patch your equipment. Patching. Set yourself a patch schedule. Like as a program director or an engineer, you schedule every Friday and you do a patch Friday. And you go and patch your streaming servers, you patch your Macs, you patch your PCs. Like you literally need to schedule that as a weekly thing to do. I can't tell you the amount of Windows systems 1 or 2 patches missed. I don't even want to tell you this stuff. That would be one really good hygiene thing to do.
Okay.
The next thing I would say from a security perspective, make the folks that you work with aware that security is a thing. The reason I'm explaining this is I don't know how to quantify it to you, but the amount of emails that people will click on, the amount of malware people will invite into the network. I mean, it's the whole human element, right? So I guess I could even say maybe offer some low-level training to your people. Make them watch a video on best email practices, what to open, what not to open. I've watched Fortune 5 companies literally fall because a C-level suite person clicked an email.
Yeah.
The third thing I would say, also just kind of from a general perspective, is make sure that the systems you're using, you're only using them for the intended purpose. And I know that may sound nebulous, but I go into a lot of stations, or I'll talk to a lot of people, and I'll see their setups, and I see them using, their Windows machines for 20 different things. You're playing with fire, and I don't think that's a great idea. We have one Mac per studio that does one or two tasks only, and that is it. If you're trying to run 30 different programs, you're going to start having like collisions within programs. It's just not a good idea. So I would try, again, take a very minimalist approach where applicable.
Don't let anybody be getting their email on the playout machine that's playing your songs.
Yes, that would be a really bad scenario, and I've watched that scenario because that's the direct access. That's your entry point network in Windows.
I want to say 10 years ago, a couple pieces of advice that I've mentioned here before. 10 years ago, this was applicable, and I don't know what the current analog would be. So 10 years ago, somebody told me, look, don't let people run as administrator on Windows, even though that may be the default with whatever Windows was being installed back then. Make them a user account, make people run as user, don't let people run as administrator. And at the time, don't use Internet Explorer. If you disallowed those two things, just those two things, you would do away with a huge amount of the threat vector. You weren't totally safe, but that was where a lot of things were happening, using Internet Explorer and running as administrator, both of which were the defaults in Windows at the time. Now, that was 10-year-old advice, and things are better now in the Windows world. So I guess I was wondering if there's any, more current, like, okay, here's two things that are often a problem. But you said that often it's the people. I did some, maybe you can suggest if there's a service. I did TV weather for a while, and I was big company, Meredith Corporation, owned the TV station that I was doing the weather at. And they had training, and they would even send out test emails to see if you'd click on it or if you'd click to report that email. And you got brownie points if you click to report. Hey, this looks scammy. Is it? Well, you're right. It was scammy. We sent it to you, and you passed the test. Are there things like that I can that I can help my employees learn what to do and what not to do?
There is. There's literally countless numbers. A lot of it's going to depend the size on the company. Obviously, the iHearts of the world or the Hubbards of the world are going to buy very different versions of this. I use a program for my HR and payroll called Gusto. They offer some of this training kind of built in at really no charge. So I do offer this. But yeah, I used to run those programs actually for a couple companies. Funny thing is, really, no matter how much training you got, about 25% of that population is going to click phishing emails regardless. So that also is not a zero-sum game. No matter what you do, no matter how much money a company spends, you're not really going to break that 25% threshold.
Yeah, gotcha.
I've watched them try.
Boy, I don't know what to do about it. We have one employee at one of my stations, and I won't name him or her, but if he clicks to print something and it doesn't print, he'll get on the internet and look for the company name that made the printer, and guess what? He Googled, and a scam company with a similar name pops up, and it sends him to a call center, and he calls, and then he calls us, me and my business partner, says, "Hey, for $150, they'll fix our printer, and they're going to send me a file."
So you're tapping a lot of the reasons why I use Mac infrastructure. There isn't enough malware or mass targeted scams as there are for Windows. So just by design, we kind of don't fall victim to a large percentage of the things that Windows users would fall victim to. Right. That was a kind of a calculated decision we made. I won't lie to you. It wasn't all sunshines and rainbows, right? We've had knockdown, drag out wars with satellite providers and software providers trying to figure out how we make these things work. But I'm here proof positive it can be done.
Let's see. We were going to switch gears real quick and talk about Docker infrastructure, Docker containers. Tell me your thoughts about that. When Telos Alliance started saying, "Hey, we've decided not to do VM packages, we've decided that Docker is, containerized software is the way to go. And I was literally playing putt-putt 2 summers ago with my son and then girlfriend, and we were there's a foursome behind us, and I talking with a guy, and he runs an IT facility in Middle Tennessee that belongs to a healthcare company. And I said, "Do you guys have any experience with these Docker container thingies?" He says, "That's all we have. Everything 100% Docker." And I said,
Yep.
"Really? You don't have any VMs?" He says, "I got a VM on my laptop to test stuff, but yeah, everything's Docker." And so Telos, we've come out with some products, an intercom system, audio processing for AM, for FM, for streaming, audio console, phone system. Anyway, I'm kind of impressed with where this is going and how well it works. Give me your thoughts on the future of that for infrastructure.
I think it's great. I'm all for Docker and I'm all for virtualization. It's using services without waste, as it were. You're not spinning up huge packages you don't really require. It actually helps from a security perspective. You can have Docker have 10, 20 packages in it that are required to run a whole program, right? Docker can be responsible for programs at certain intervals for itself. A lot of the big Fortune 500 tech companies of the world leverage Docker on a daily basis. So to your point, I think that's awesome that the Telos Alliance is doing that. And a lot of the stuff we deploy, even through DigitalOcean, is deployed through Docker and virtualization. So a huge proponent of it. No argument here.
And you've mentioned DigitalOcean a few times. I got to play with it just a little bit. Can I liken that to a service a bit like AWS or Microsoft Azure?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
They're effectively the same. You've got AWS, you've got Google Cloud, DigitalOcean, Linode. I mean, they're a veritable who's who. A lot of it comes down to your use case. Even when you're talking about Dockerized, I'm probably one of very few mom and pop owned stations that are running Dockerized anything in radio. Right now, when you're talking about obviously the bigger dogs in the world, yes, because they've got to push it out across a platform of infrastructures. That's where Docker really gets to be helpful. You can time those deployments, you can monitor those deployments, you can stage those deployments, test them, right? A lot of local stations aren't having that level of infrastructure where they need to kind of do that level of upkeep. DigitalOcean is literally on par with those. You could even use DigitalOcean or AWS as like an FTP transfer client. You can get that installed for like $5. So those services have a lot more uses than I think people even give them credit for.
Would using some cloud services, as you do, can that reduce your dependency on local internet bandwidth? Like if you have, like where you have a little bit of trouble getting the kind of bandwidth you'd want to get. What if a lot of your stuff is happening up in the cloud?
Yeah, yes, that's I think the future state of radio and kind of the global panacea, right? We're just extracting audio from the cloud in real time, and there's some magical world clock that's controlling it all for us. That would be amazing. Of course, it doesn't quite work that way yet. It's difficult. In order to overcome bandwidth and internet limitations, usually we try to just keep a local copy. Right? It's kind of the old school solution.
Yeah.
So if I got a show I need to air and it's important, I'll put that thing right on the den and source it right up, right? And then we'll store it when we're done, kind of perpetuity.
Chuck Helstein is our guest. We got one more segment after this commercial announcement where Chuck, and as usual, I forgot to tell Chuck that the last segment is our tip of the week. So when we come back from this little commercial break, I'm going to ask Chuck, what's your parting advice for our viewers and listeners? Sage advice from an IT expert and radio guy, Chuck Helstein. That's coming up. Our show This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you in part by Angry Audio. And you got to check this out, the new Rave console. I know we've talked about it on and off for a long time. And this is one of the difficulties of manufacturing. Things just always take longer. Well, they're shipping now. Oh my gosh, they're finally shipping the Rave console. Now, this console it's high tech in a different way. This is an analog audio console. It's designed by an analog freaking genius, and that's Mike Dosh. Mike designed a console for PR&E, Pacific Recorders and Engineering. Mike is a recording engineer himself. He's also a musician. Michael understands really high quality audio, and he builds really cool stuff. So this is an analog console. It has the cool Studio Hub connectors everywhere except for the microphones. You do get XLR connectors for your mics, but you can also go in with Studio Hub. And this console has, 8 faders, and then it's got linear faders for your monitor volume and your headphone volume. That's kind of cool. It has just the right amount of features that you need for a small studio. Even if it needs to be super high quality, you can run a network with this. You can run a network show because the quality is just super, super high. If you follow Angry Audio on Facebook, you can go see that Mike has just started shipping these now. Finally, power supply is included. This little dude is heavy. It is well made. It's got plenty of steel in it. It's a really nice little audio console. Full throw faders for monitor and headphone volume, and full throw faders. They're not miniature faders. These are full size faders. It has 2 mix minus outputs with talkback on them as well. It's got up to 4 mics coming into it. And a couple of the channels are switchable between, the RCA, they call it the IHF standard, between RCA and or line level balanced inputs. And the mic preamps are just clean as a whistle. They are just so cool. And it'll provide phantom power if you need that too. Check that out. The Rave console from Angry Audio. By the way, it was a winner, best of show from Radio World at this year's NAB show. Angry Audio, the website angryaudio.com. Don't get mad at bad audio. Get angry. And the bad audio goes away. It becomes wonderful. Hey, the other thing I want to tell you about is from Max Connect. Max Connect, we've talked for years about their wireless offering, their 4G LTE service that's a cut above everybody else's. Well, they have this box that is very useful for FM audio processors that run on a PC. And for example, the Omnia SST or Stereo Tool or Breakaway One. These are different FM audio processors available to run on a PC. And the problem with those is finding a sound card that will give you a proper multiplex or composite, as we say in the US typically, output. This is the high quality, high bandwidth output that goes into your FM exciter. Well, Max Connect and Angry Audio got together to develop the U192. It's branded Max Connect. There it is on the screen. The Max Connect Broadcast U.192 MPX USB sound card. So it plugs into the USB connector on the PC that is running the FM processor. So like Stereo Tool, Omnia SST, Breakaway One. And it gives you that analog, high quality, super low noise, high quality MPX output to run that into your FM transmitter. Or if you've got an analog STL or even a digital STL that's carrying MPX, just plug it into that STL input instead of the, what you maybe you used to have, an old Orban or some other processor feeding that. Now you use the output of the U192. And, this has been a problem to get sound cards that behave well enough to do this, because that baseband signal, that's actually kind of fragile. It needs to be perfectly done, or else everything you transmit is going to be compromised a little bit at least. Well, the U192, no compromise. It is absolutely beautiful. It also has AES EBU inputs and outputs, so you can get those in and out from your computer as well. So check it out. It's the first purpose-built broadcast quality USB sound card that has a native MPX output. If you're into doing your FM processing with one of these Windows computer programs, and some of them are amazing, just amazing. I'm using Omnia SST at one of my stations and love it. I've been using it for years, and we happen to be using Micro MPX for that. But if I needed a local output, this is it right here. Thanks a lot, Max Connect, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, we got a couple minutes left, and Chuck Helstein is our guest. He is in Sedona, Arizona, with his Yacht Rock station, KAZM. And Chuck, in the couple minutes remaining, maybe you can finish up with some advice that our engineers could walk away with and maybe even do something about.
Yeah, first off, I just got to say I'm jealous. Every commercial you take, I'm like, oh, look at the pretty tools. Because as a Mac tech, I don't get to use any of them. I don't have this selection. So I'm saving myself money, but I'm depriving myself the joy of buying toys. I'm like, ooh, I like that Max Connect. I want that. Ooh, Angry Audio. I should get that, right? But I'm all set.
Well, that's what commercials are supposed to do. So they're working. They're working.
Yes, they're all great products. I've used them all. So, but yeah, kind of final thoughts, man. Aside from being jealous of all the cool toys all you guys do, I just kind of wanted to challenge folks. Maybe look at your station. Think to yourself, what to implement here? What cost-cutting measures can I implement here? What are some little things I can do? Embrace the technology. Our users and the folks that consume radio are expecting radio to kind of move forward. In order for us as an industry to do that, we're going to have to lean into the tech, and we're going to have to start to become a little bit more tech experts than maybe we had been historically in the past. So, a little bit of work, a little bit of reading, and a lot of tinkering, you can get it there, man.
Good deal. What website would we find your station at if we want to hear some Yacht Rock?
Absolutely. You can check us out at mellowmountainradio.com.
I had trouble spelling that before. Let's see. MELLOW, mellowmountainradio.com. There it is.
MELLOW. Yep.
Good deal. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. I'll crank that up, and I'm going to listen while my wife and I are having a little margarita here in a few minutes.
Cool, man. We'll give you a shout out. What song you want to hear?
That seems appropriate. Chuck Helstein, thank you for being our guest. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate Frank Martin putting us together. Really good.
Thanks, man. It was a pleasure, Kirk. Thank you so much, man.
Pleasure for me, too. Thanks a lot. And next week, what do we have next week? We've got, I should check on this. I got a guest for next week. Let me go look real quick. I haven't filled it out yet. Isn't that great? In a couple weeks from now, we've got high-tech home studios with Mark Haycook. That's coming up. And then I got a great guest at the end of June. Bill Robertson with Digital Alert Systems is going to talk about EAS at the edge. Really cool stuff there. All right. Thanks a lot to Suncast for producing today's show. I really appreciate you, Suncast, for doing another terrific job. And we'll see you next week here on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.